G'day, team, and welcome to another edition of the Rugby League Lounge weekly show. And today I'm very honoured to introduce my guest, Andy Raymond. I'm sure all of you guys are familiar who he is, but Andy, I'll get you to introduce yourself, mate. Thank you for coming on once again.
My pleasure, Luke, and thanks for having me in the Rugby League Lounge, brother. Andy Raymond, he is just one of the boys. He's not a TV guy. He's nothing different. He's nothing special. He's one of the fellas that loves a beer, loves watching his footy, loves a chat about footy as well. Mate, I was brought up in Western Sydney in the late 70s, early 80s. I'm big on honesty. I'm big on loyalty. And that doesn't matter if it's a personal relationship or a professional relationship. Just an honest bloke who loves his footy and still loves it 30 years after first working in the industry.
Seems like the ideal bloke to have a part of the Rugby League Lounge community, that's for sure. It's like I said, honour having you on. So just start on talking about how your love and passion for rugby league started.
Back in, I think I was 6 years old or 5 years old when I first played my first game of rugby league. I don't think I did too much tackling or running. I think I was the kid that was building sand castles or dirt castles at the back of the field. And I played all the way through until 21, 22 years of age. Absolutely loved it. Mate, went all right, but was never going to be, a grade player, sadly. That would have been fulfilling a dream. But the next best thing was still being involved in the game and working in the game from the other side of the sideline, and doing the commentary and doing the interviews. But I loved it, and it's still my passion. My family's passion was actually motorsport. My father was a very successful motorsport commentator here in Australia for 30-odd years and was the face to the V8s throughout the 70s, 80s and 90s. They loved their motorsport, him and his brother. And whilst I enjoyed it, rugby league was where my heart was. And, mate, it's a love affair that continues all the way through to 2021.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, no, I read that, was reading about that, your dad, how his impact on the motor racing world. And that's really cool that you've been able to kind of continue his legacy within what you've done. Just touching on your commentary career, and I'm just going to touch on one of my most memorable moments from witnessing you on TV, and also part of your commentary was a try that might not even hold significance to you, but the Shaun Johnson try in 2011, and I was just listening it to again. It's one of those things where it's a great individual try, but I think you do enhance the try. Your call on it is so crisp, and I think it really paints a really good picture of what's happened, especially if Shaun Johnson at the time was really just emerged on the stage. And yeah, I remember watching that game live, and the call is just permanently in my head. Has Johnson still got the legs? He certainly does. So yeah, for me, that was a real memorable call for me. Do you remember that call in particular?
Yeah, I do remember that call, and I don't remember a lot of them over the years because it has been a lot of years and a lot of rugby league games. I always went by the mantra whenever I was on TV or still on and on radio, but not everyone at home has had a great week, whether it's relationship troubles, financial troubles, personal or professional troubles, but they were paying to see me, or they had chosen to watch a game and I was on. And I always just wanted to be able to take a viewer on the lounge, on the Rugby League Lounge. I wanted to take them away from their issues for 2 hours for the week, give them a good and professional call, make them relax and enjoy the game as a game of footy, an athletic contest, but also be entertained. I wanted to take their mind off their issues for a couple of hours a week. And if I was able to do that through a story, some nice commentary, a bad dad joke, or whatever it was, if I was able to do that, mate, I considered that I had done my job because, mate, not all of us have 7 great days in 1 week, and we never know what our mates or our family or part of the rugby league family are going through. And I just thought if I could cheer someone up, that's a really cool thing. So it was something I was always mindful of. And if I was able to bring that, just that little bit of cheer or relaxation, job done.
Well, you certainly did that, Andy. And I was actually going to ask you about your Unfiltered podcast and kind of what your kind of intentions were for creating that podcast. But I actually think you kind of summed it up there, because honestly, every time I listen, I get a joy. Like you said, you tell a few jokes, a lot of fart jokes intended too. So yeah, is there kind of is it basically echoing what you've just said about your commentary with the Unfiltered podcast?
Yeah, it very much is. We'd looked at podcasts, we being my wife and I, looked at podcasts for a number of years, but I was so busy doing what I was doing at Fox Sports that we weren't able to properly and professionally follow it up. And when I left Fox Sports after COVID hit and I was given my marching orders, we already had a base of what we would have liked to try and achieve through a podcast. And it is exactly the same, Luke. If you can throw the podcast on the way to work or on your morning walk and you're listening on the phone, whatever it may be, if it can just take you to a place in your mind where you forget about the mortgage or you forget about the issues at home and just enjoy some rugby league chat, whether it's serious chat with some of the older legends of the game or whether it's, a little bit of lighthearted stuff and a few fart jokes with some of the current players. But yeah, just an enjoyable listening experience is what we're trying to create.
Yeah, no, I definitely understand. I do quite a bit of running's kind of my passion outside of doing the rugby league lounge, and a lot of times it's to get away from the bullshit, and it's really easy to do that by putting a podcast on. And I think you got a great variety of having a serious chat and also that just having a laugh, and also like from a guy that's mainly rugby league based. The podcast that I probably enjoyed the most was your one with Danny Green. And it was probably because I didn't know too much about Danny Green. So being able to get insight into him was a very cool way to do it. And I really enjoyed it. I've enjoyed all your podcasts, but that one was just stand out for me. Yeah.
I enjoyed the Danny Green one, mate. He was, and the rest of my guests are, I'm very lucky in the respect that I've built up, wonderful relationships professionally and personally with a lot of these guys over the years, and they feel like they can open up to me about not only the good times but the tough times, and they really introduce themselves as a person, not just the athlete. And in a lot of their cases, the athlete and the person, very, very different people. So it's nice to actually chat to the bloke as opposed to the superstar.
Yeah, for sure. And I think you touched on the key point there. I think they open up to you because they've got that respect to you. It is about creating a relationship. They're not just going to tell any bloke about all that kind of stuff deep down. You got to build that relationship first. So, some great honest chats. And I enjoy listening to more in the future. I guess we better start talking about some footy. That's why I brought you on. And just before we kind of talk about 2021, we're going to talk about the way the game has changed, which is really evident now, obviously, with the new rule changes, especially from last year after COVID. We saw the new changes with the 6 again call and going back to the one referee. Overall, how do you feel about these rule changes? Obviously, it's increased the speed of the game, but have you ever noticed a rule change that's probably, like, I wouldn't say changed the fabric of the game as much as this, but it's kind of has changed the
Yeah.
game. Yeah, just have you noticed a rule change the game quite like the six again call?
No,
No.
that's the short answer. Absolutely not. It has changed the game significantly. And I've been watching rugby league and have a memory of rugby league going back to about 1984. I think genuinely the last change in the game that was like this would have been in the late 1960s when they went from the unlimited tackle rule. And for 2 seasons, they went from unlimited tackle back to a 4 tackle rule. And then I think it was 68 or 69, they settled on 6 tackles. So the game changed dramatically back then, but I've certainly seen nothing like this, and it has changed the game immeasurably, I think. I've got a theory that it's changed it too much, too soon. I think it's gone to a pace that is far beyond what we have seen. And I was hoping actually that the referees and the decision makers were maybe going to be just a little more lenient in their interpretation of what was happening on the field to try and just narrow the gap between what it was and what it is. That may still come, but mate, it's been a huge change. We see today Trent Merrin has retired. I think most players are going to be retiring
Oh, the phone.
earlier.
I did not realize that. Did Trent Merrin just announce he was retiring?
Trent Merrin has announced he's retiring effective immediately.
Wow.
And he said in his statement, he said, I've outgrown the game and the game has outgrown me. And for Big Mez, I think that's basically him saying, I'm a chubby mid-30s forward that carries plenty of weight around the park, and it's just too bloody fast for me.
Yeah.
I wish Trent all the best. He's been a wonderful ambassador for the game. He's been a wonderful player for the game.
Oh, and truly.
But I think the age of retirement will probably come down over the next couple of years significantly. Apart from, a couple of key positions, maybe a halfback and a hooker, because they are covering so much ground, more ground. They are doing so much more work. The cardio requirements on these guys are absolutely insane at the moment. There's the argument, has it got too much like touch or tag footy? No, because it's still tackle footy and there's still confrontations and the heavy stuff. But I think they've probably gone a bit too far with it.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting take. Also, when you consider like the players when it happened were in the midst of a season with the normal rules, and then all of a sudden COVID's happening, they're getting back into their bubbles, and oh, by the way, we're adding these new rules, so they're not conditioned to it. Yeah, I tend to agree too, but I think it's one of those things that I think we might see the real benefits from it in a few years' time. And teams, as we probably will touch on, there's a noticeable gap between the good teams and the bad teams. Sorry, I shouldn't say bad teams, but you understand what I mean. And it is because potentially they've those teams haven't been able to catch up to the new rule changes. But I think over
there's a couple of ways of looking at that too, because the new rules were brought in literally overnight. COVID presented a pause in the season. The rules changed, and the rosters in every club were set, and most of them were set for this year. So there's 2 elements. Is your roster appropriate for the new rules? Yes, for the teams that are succeeding. No, for the teams that aren't succeeding. But then it's also up to the coaches and the coaching staff to try and formulate a game plan that that succeeds in this new style of footy. So, there's probably a bunch of guys at each club that have signed 3 or 4 year deals that the coach would now like to think, geez, he doesn't really suit me under these new rules. If I could get rid of him, I probably would. So I think we're going to see a lot of changes over the next 18 months. I think it's going to be huge. This week alone, we've seen Will Chambers come back, Chad Townsend go to the North Queensland Cowboys. There was a couple more yesterday.
Danny Levi to the Broncos.
Danny Levi to the Broncos, of course. How could I forget that?
Hastings.
Jackson Hastings. I think we are going to see a ton of player movement with coaches unhappy with their roster because of the new rules. And I don't always like that because little kids like their player at their club. So they go and buy the Townsend jersey at the Sharks, and all of a sudden he's off for the Cowboys. And if that happens too much, the casual fan or the younger fan feels like they're getting ripped off. They want their players at their club, which is what it was back in the day. But and I know things can't always remain the same, but I reckon there's going to be a heap of player and club changes over the next 18 months.
Yeah, for sure. And we'll move on shortly, but I just want to touch on that because it's starting to sound like I don't know if you follow much American sports, but the NBA, it's a lot about following the athlete rather than the team. Like I've got a LeBron jersey who was at the Heat, but he's been on the Cavs, he's been on the Lakers and the Cavs twice, Westbrook, all sorts. They change every season. So yes, I am scared we're going to get to that. And also to touch on that, what's so great about the NRL, and obviously the last 4 years it's been the premierships have been won by the Roosters and the Storm, but I think it was something like since the turn of the decade and turn of the century in 2000, I think we had 13 different NRL champions, which is crazy. Now I think there's a bit of luck in that, or a bit of, I don't think that was sustainable. But we're definitely trending backwards in that position. So, yeah, it's a bit of shame about that. But anyway, we will touch on the teams that have adapted to the rules and got the rosters, suited definitely to play to this up-tempo style. And look, at the start of the season, I thought it was going to be 6 teams. And it was those 6 teams last year that finished in the top 6. Obviously, you got the Storm, the Panthers, the Rabbitohs, the Raiders, the Eels, and the Roosters. Out of them, do you see a tier within a tier there about your genuine title contenders?
I don't at the moment, and I'll agree on those 6 teams, and I actually think they're the only 6 teams at this point in time that I believe that can be there in the grand final. Because of the volume of injuries that we have seen so far and because of the fatigue that we will see over the next couple of months, I actually think the grand finalists will be determined by the 2 sides who have the least amount of injuries and the most depth come September. And I know there's always an element of luck in getting injuries or avoiding injuries, and that team is always going to be better placed. But I think in 2021, because of the rule changes, because of the volume of injuries, I think that's going to be the case. The Roosters at the moment, for me, they are hanging on to that 6th spot by that much. One more significant injury, and I would be almost saying I reckon we can put the red pen through them because Boyd Cordner, Jake Friend, Sammy Verrills, who's back this week, they had Lindsay Collins out. I mean, the list just continues to grow and grow for the poor Roosters. I reckon they're probably only an injury or one long-term injury away from being ruled out. Luke Keary, of course, the other one.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and honestly, if they didn't have the fact that they arguably, obviously, touched on them in the Storm, the 2 most dominant sides of last so-and-so, and the great system place also of Robbo, we probably would be running the red pen through them already. So, yeah, for me, I tend to agree. and yeah, the depth is huge. I think the Raiders' depth was highlighted immensely over the off season. I think Ryan James come in, and kind of people have forgotten about how impactful he was. Who was borderline an Origin player and was unlucky not to be in there in one particular season. I remember Matt Pryor actually just got the nod over him, so he's come in. Right. He's been very valuable. But I do think the Rabbitohs, the Panthers, and the Storm, it will be two of them three for me. Will be my favourites for the grand final. I don't know if you're aware, but I'm a Storm fan, so I've always got a bias towards the mighty Melbourne Storm. And I thought our biggest X factor last year was the bench. You bring, and in this year it's going to be also an issue now with you either Harry Grant or Brandon Smith off the pine. Do you see any big X factors that could get their team over the hump in 2021? Maybe.
Interesting one. And you speak about depth there, and I think the Rabbitohs have got the best backline depth. I think the Raiders have got the best forward depth. I think the Melbourne Storm have got the best overall depth. And by a considerable margin, those three sides. So in those three instances, I think those three clubs are probably better suited and better off than the others. As for the X factor, we've seen it over the years, and you especially, Luke, being a Storm fan, it's wonderful to play good individual footy in April, in May, and in June. But come September, and it's happened for as long as I can remember, the Melbourne Storm individually and collectively rise to a form level that they haven't been all year. And it was typified with Cameron Smith, Billy Slater, and Cooper Cronk for a decade. They'd play really good footy. They'd play 8 out of 10 footy most weeks throughout Origin. And come round 26, they'd rise to 9.5 out of 10. And there's your X factor. If Peppenhausen, Munster, Bromwich and Hughes can do that, good luck trying to stop them. That said, if Nathan Cleary, Jerome Luai, James Fisher-Harris and Dylan Edwards do the same thing, good luck trying to stop them. It's all in the timing. Craig Bellamy is the guy that's got the timing right, and he's proven that for more than a generation. He's seen 3 waves of players come through and go at the Storm, yet he's maintained the same success rate. Awesome, mate. Awesome.
Yeah. Talking about timing and lifting up when it comes finals time, are you optimistic on your Parramatta boys doing that this season?
Absolutely not.
Hey, honesty is the best policy.
Yeah, that's exactly. I'd love to tell you I'm brimming with confidence and this year's going to be different. I look at that and I look at the Panthers as well. And here's a really scary one with the Panthers. Api Coruscant only returned to the Panthers at the start of last year. So what they were able to achieve in the spine of the side, and for those that aren't familiar, the spine of the side, that's what steers the team around the park. They're the players that determine where they go, when they go, and how it happens. And that's the fullback in jersey 1, the 5'8" in jersey 6, the halfback in jersey 7, and the hooker in jersey 9. Api Coruscant only had played a dozen games with the spine before they got into the final series. That is awesome. That the fact they were able to gel as a combination just so quickly. Melbourne are going to go through that this year without Cameron Smith, with either Harry and or Brandon. Parramatta still very much going through that, even though their 4 players, Clint Gutherson, Dylan Brown, Mitch Moses and Reid Marnie, have all been there for a number of years. When you go back and take a look at Dylan Brown's injuries over last year and then 2 years prior with his back problems, Reid Marnie's injuries, Mitchell Moses, an ankle or a knee, whatever it was, they haven't played a lot of footy together. So the stronger the combination between those four players is, the better the side goes. And I think given a bit of time, that the Parramatta spine may well improve and improve dramatically. I'm certainly hoping so.
Yeah, I'm hoping for you as well, man. We'll just touch on obviously we've identified 6 teams at this stage. I think the Dragons and the Titans round out the top 8. Do you see those teams? And we're obviously assuming that hopefully the Roosters can stay afloat with their injuries. If we lock in the 6 teams, who will be the other 2 teams that you believe will join them at the end of the season?
I think there's a bit of a playoff there. I think there's probably 4 or 5 sides we could say might really struggle. I think the Dragons, the Titans, the Warriors, and the Knights are probably, in all probability, the 4 sides that may battle for 2 positions at the lower end of the top 8. But again, it comes down to injuries. Mitchell Pearce is out for a while. Adam Fanua-Blake is out for a while. If for the Titans, if Jamal Fogarty or AJ Brimson or David Fafita spend longer than a month on the sideline and they lose 4 games, they're in all sorts of trouble.
Yeah, that's a good point. So we talked about being deep within a roster. Is there any roster in particular there that is
No, not for me, Luke. I think the top 6 sides have actually got the deepest roster. Maybe a question mark over the Roosters, the Dragons, Titans, Warriors, and Knights. I think the Warriors are probably better placed than the other 3 sides in terms of depth, but I also don't think it's the type of depth that the top 6 sides have. And you've only got to have a look at Melbourne. Everyone fit there. And, mate, there's going to come some big questions in the next couple of weeks with Dale Finucane coming back for the Melbourne Storm. He's a lock forward. He's an out-and-out lock forward. Harry Grant will be starting. He's the better of the hookers. Well, then there's Nelson and Brandon, who have both been playing a 13 role at times or a hooker role. Wow, there's an abundance of talent down there when you can leave a guy like Nico Hines out of the 17, you're doing something pretty good.
Yeah, for sure. Like you just named 3 guys that could play lock there, and they all bring different styles. Obviously, you got the big towering.
Exactly right.
He's able to keep the ball alive with his offload. Even though, I tell you what, out of all the Storm players, I think him and Vunivalu probably are responsible for the most hairs being pulled out of my head because, there's been a few times where I've done some head shakes. I'll just tell you a story about Vunivalu, that one in particular that he did when he caught a crazy ball. It was a few years against the Roosters. And I don't know why he tried to catch it, but he caught it around his ankles and he got this sense of energy. And he just runs up and he tries to jump over the bloke.
Yeah. I think we all just sat there thinking, what the F are you doing? Yeah. That was crazy.
That was crazy. And we'll round out talking about the 2021 comp so far. And I guess we'll touch on kind of I shouldn't say the wooden spoon race. Now, I want to start with the Cowboys. They're my team, always kind of predict. I'm always a full by the Cowboys sword. I always put it in the high. I think it's also when I think about the most impactful forward in the game when he's on is Tamalolo. And I just want to see this team succeed. And they just don't. And obviously I talked myself into the Todd Payton factor. And I don't think I considered, he's just come in. I'll give him time. But I just thought there were places and there were things in place already to kind of move the process along swimmingly, but it hasn't happened. So, Cowboys have been my biggest disappointment so far. And is there any wooden spoon contender that you want to touch on? Or
you know what? In all these years, Luke, I've never nominated someone for the wooden spoon, only because I'm the positive guy. I'm not the negative guy. But I will say the Canterbury Bulldogs. I had a look during the week. They're got a tough old run over the next couple of weeks, and there is every chance at this point in time they could be none and 11. And I haven't even looked at the draw beyond that. They're really struggling, and they're struggling more than I thought they would. The players seem a little lost in whatever Trent Barrett is trying to achieve, or the style of game that he's trying to play. They just don't seem settled. I think it's going to be a real struggle for the Dogs this year, mate. I really, really do.
Yeah, I agree. I obviously didn't expect them to, make the eight, but I was definitely looking ahead for 2022, especially when you consider Burton and Addo-Carr coming in, and it's second year into the Trent Barrett phase of the Belmore.
Jeez, they're going to have an expensive back line, mate. They really are. You're going to have Nick Kotrick on huge bucks on one wing, Josh Addo-Carr on huge bucks on the other wing. Matt Burton, does he play centre or does he play 5'8"? You'd say he'll play 5'8", but Jake Averillo is arguably their best at the moment, playing at 6.
Yep.
Look, when you're struggling as a club, there's a theory that you grab whoever you can that is better than your current roster. And maybe that's what the Bulldogs are in the process of doing, because their roster rebuild moving forward, to me, with the addition of Burton and Addo-Carr out in the back line, doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
No, I tend to agree. And yeah, you talk about that fullback issue with Corey Allen they signed, and ultimately
Corey Allen there. You got Will Hopewadi.
He can
Dallin.
Yeah, I shouldn't say he only can play fullback, but I believe by a mile his only value is at fullback, and he hasn't been able to provide that so far.
Yep.
Yeah, it is concerns, and there's nothing in the forward. There's a few positive sides in the forward pack, but obviously Hetherington is facing a few weeks suspension, and he some problems to sort in terms of that. Just been,
very much so.
It's been able to control that. We've seen the great deal with that. The likes of Sam Burgess, he was sometimes it got the best of him, but at the end of the day, he was able to manage it most of the time. And and I'm not saying Hetherington's going to be Sam Burgess, but I think there's a way he can use that to help him rather than hinder him, because at the moment it's hindering him more than helping him.
I agree.
We're going to get on to do you still have a couple 5 minutes or so, Andy, of your time?
Of course I do, mate. Yeah.
Awesome. Just before we get on to Legend Lounge, your tip for the Dally M. Not that I haven't prepared you for this, but got any tip?
Wow. My tip for the Dally M. When looking at a Dally M play, I always try and look for obviously a standout player, but a standout player in a footy side that he dominates, so he's going to score points. And, you look at the Melbourne Storm, you could say Ryan Pappenhausen or Harry Grant, but they're going to take points off each other throughout the year very regularly.
Smith, Slater, and still able to do it.
Exactly right.
Yeah,
I'll say Nathan Cleary. I'll say Nathan Cleary for the Dally M, and I know there's a whole lot of a really good footballers around him, but when they win, he's normally in the top 2 players on the field. So as a result, he's accumulating points.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking about my answer on the spot here, and I think you've stolen the words out of my mouth, but I will go. I'll back it. I'll go Pappenhausen.
There you go.
No,
you're going to be loyal to the Storm, mate.
Yeah. Actually, before the season started and before his injury, I thought Harry Grant could get it as well, but obviously is probably going to be detrimental to him, obviously missing those first 4 games. So, hey, thanks, Andy, very much for coming on. And we're going to end with the segment that I did my first ever episode with a guy called Griffin Neame, who just made the big shout out to Griffin Neame, who just got promoted to the top 30 of the Cowboys. He's only 20 years old. He is absolutely
Yep.
killing it over there. So huge congrats to him. But I did this segment with him many moons ago, and I get to bring it back. So basically, this is setting up the perfect lounge for the legend Andy Raymond. So you get to pick three guests. Now, one of these guests has to be a rugby league personality. Now, I understand this is very hard for you because you've met so many people and have so much respect, but is there anyone in particular you love to have aside you on the league lounge?
There is a million that I would love to invite, but the lounge isn't big enough. And there's a million there for very different reasons. I've been great mates with this guy for many, many years, enjoyed many laughs and cold beers. So I'm bringing Gordon Tallis along to the lounge with me.
Oh, I love that. I might have to pull up a chair for myself there to have a yarn with Gordy. Yeah, one of my favourites. A guy that I didn't get to see live, but one of my favourite players that I never got to witness live. So,
Yeah.
An athlete from any other code.
An athlete from any other code. Well, I figure if I'm bringing Gordy along, that there'll be an esky somewhere near the lounge and maybe some ice and maybe some beers.
We'll get to that. We'll get to that later.
Okay, and I tell you who I did have a beer with back in the mid '90s and had a night out with him over in Christchurch. The legend himself, the great Sean Fitzpatrick.
Oh, yeah.
If it's a non-rugby league player and an athlete, the former All Black hooker and tough guy Sean Fitzpatrick is more than welcome.
Yeah, for a long time had the record for the most tests from All Black, if I believe, about 90 something. Definitely surprised me. A great choice. And one last guess, just any famous celebrity or even someone that might not be famous, even a friend or a family member.
Okay, I'll release a bit about myself here at the moment. It's not an obsession, but I've got a real interest in a couple of areas that are away from rugby league, and I actually use them, almost as an escape from rugby league. And that's the JFK assassination conspiracies back from the early 60s when the American president was shot, and also a CIA program in the United States called MK Ultra. And it was a mind-altering program that was secretly run by the CIA. Not even the government and the president knew about it. And it was basically the introduction of a lot of hardcore drugs in the States. And they were trying to basically see if they could reprogram minds and reprogram people into what they wanted them to believe. So two really scary and different theories. But I will invite onto the lounge a guy called Jack Ruby. Now, when JFK, the president, was shot in November of 1963, it was alleged he was shot by a lone nutcase called Lee Harvey Oswald. Lee Harvey Oswald was taken to the Dallas police station, and 2 days later, a gentleman called Jack Ruby, who was a nightclub owner, had an association with the mafia, but also knew the bigwigs in and around Dallas, walked into the car park of a police station and shot Lee Harvey Oswald dead live on national TV.
Right.
As a result, Jack Ruby was then sentenced into prison, and after a few years in prison, he wrote a letter to the Attorney General and said, I'm ready to come clean. I know more about John F. Kennedy and what happened than anyone knows, and I'm the only person. And Lee Harvey Oswald was set up and I was set up. Well, Jack Ruby died in prison 2 weeks later. another part of the conspiracy. So I'm going to throw Jack Ruby, if we can get him back, alongside Sean Fitzpatrick, Gordon Tallis, and myself, and it might be a hell of a conversation.
Yeah, sounds definitely for a span of the works of that one, but yeah, definitely have to do my research after we get off here. Wow, it's threw me for a six. So I didn't expect that, but you guys have to entertain yourself. So a movie franchise to put on.
A movie franchise to put on. Tell you what, just for enjoyment and nice and relaxed, I would either go Fast and Furious or Rocky.
Awesome. Fast and Furious is one of my favorites. And during lockdown, Mum was trying desperately hard to get the Rocky series here. Because I must admit, I watched Creed 1 and Creed 2. Absolutely loved them. And I did feel a bit guilty because I hadn't properly watched Rocky, but I've watched the first one now and really enjoyed it. So I think those will be my top two choices as well. And a TV series to watch with your three mates.
Oh, that's a given. Seinfeld, straight on, and you've got me. And I will pee myself laughing for hours and hours still. I reckon I've seen every episode 2 or 3 times, but it gets me each time. So Seinfeld.
Yeah, I can't question you there. And you want to put some music on in the background. Who's an artist that you're going to repeat?
An artist that I'm going to repeat.
Or a band as well.
Okay. I'll throw one at you. Garth Brooks. Absolutely love Garth Brooks. I am a fan of country and Western music to a degree, but a fan of Garth Brooks. I've seen him live in Las Vegas. The show was absolutely mind-blowing. So Garth Brooks on the stereo.
Fantastic. And we're going to get to the food and the beverages first, but just another like an activity, kind of a recreational activity that you can do within the lounge. So
okay, well, it wouldn't be boxing. We wouldn't have fake gloves, not with Gordon Tallis and Sean Fitzpatrick there. I don't think trivia would be our go. So it'd be some type of bullshitting contest. Who could tell the biggest lie?
Who would your money be on there?
Oh, Tallis.
Yeah.
One of the great storytellers.
Yeah, no, you can't argue there from what I've heard. And also, let's get on to the snacks. Obviously you're not going to starve. I'm going to get you to choose one sweet dish and one savory dish.
Have a look at the size of the two blokes that are next to me, Tallis and Fitzpatrick. So I might combine the two dishes into one, the sweet and the savory, and just say lots of. Yeah. That would be the easiest food, just lots of food, because Fitzpatrick, Tallis, and Raymond alone are going to clean up their fair share.
Yeah, right on the money there. And you got to have a beverage to kind of make it all go down nicely. So you kind of touched on earlier, will be a big a few beers, I'm sure.
Yeah, just an endless supply of beers coming out of the esky, and there would probably need to be, but a nice cold beer. I'm not overly fussed as to which beer I do drink. I'm not huge on the craft beers that seem to be all the rage at the moment. It's more the older stuff, but happy to have a beer, a chat, tell a few lies, and enjoy an afternoon on the Rugby League Lounge.
It sounds great. And it's actually one I just added, but I would be really interested, and you might not pop off your head straight away, so it's all good, but would be one sporting event or rugby league match or that you would have on VHS that you'd like to plug in and watch to kind of maybe your last thing you do with your crew before leaving the lounge?
Absolutely. I can give you an answer straight away. The 1986 Rugby League Grand Final, Parramatta versus Canterbury, 4-2 to the Parramatta Eels. It was my first grand final live as a young kid on the hill, and it was Parramatta's last premiership. So that still hurts because it was a long, long time ago.
Yeah, I can imagine. Great choice. And hey, let's wrap it up there. I really wish we didn't have to, but you got to go. And I really enjoyed this chat, Andy. And once again, really appreciate you coming on. And I'm sure the listeners and the viewers will too. And we appreciate everything you've done for the sport. And I look forward to continue listening to you into the future.
Luke, it's been an absolute pleasure. And to anyone that has listened and or watched, thank you very much for your support. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you got a giggle. I hope you enjoyed it. And have a good, safe week, legends. Been a pleasure.
So catch you next week, guys.